Hello, welcome back to another AP3 video. In today's video, we'll be going over AP Environmental Science topic 5.12, Introduction to Sustainability. So first, let's go over what's the concept of sustainability. Basically, it's the ability to use and maintain a resource indefinitely or for future generations. And we have three examples going over sustainable, unsustainable, and wasteful. So let's get into it. As we can see from the first image, we have input equals output, basically meaning that the use of the resource is going to equal the replenishment of the resource. So it's going to be sustainable. So if we use what replenished naturally, then this resource will never be depleted. It will stay the same level. So now we're going to talk about unsustainable, when input is less than output and output's greater than input. So the use of the resource is going to be greater than the replenishment of the resource, which it will lead to a lack of resource for future generations. An example is water. So as water tables start to fall, the price of water increases. And the last example is going to be wasteful. So input is going to be greater than output. So the use of a resource is going to be less than the replenishment of the resource. And it's going to be wasteful. Now, if you stay taking water from an area, the area will stay flooding and it's wasteful, leading to damage. So this is the example of waste when it comes to sustainability. So now we're going to talk about environmental indicators that can guide humans to sustainable so we can talk about first the biological diversity. So healthier ecosystems are restrained to disturbances, and when we harvest a source, we want to make sure we're taking enough so that the ecosystem can replenish itself and remain healthy for future generations. So what's important when it comes to sustainability is preserve the biodiversity. When it comes to food production, poor practices lead to soil degradation and water pollution. And sustainable practices will have the soil fertile for future generations, and food security needs to be safe for the future. So we need sustainable food practices. And now we're going to talk about global surface temperatures and CO2 concentrations, or carbon dioxide. And excessive carbon dioxide, or CO2, increases global temperatures, creating climate change. Now, the use of fossil fuels increases CO2 emissions at a fast rate, and we want to produce the most CO2 that's going to be sequestered. So we want to decrease our energy use when it comes to carbon dioxide, so it doesn't lead to climate change and increasing global temperatures. So let's talk about human population. Now, human population is an exponential growth, which stresses our planet, basically. So demand for resources grows, and the demand for resources grows as the population grows exponentially. And we need to control our population and make sure our human population stays in check because our resources are very limited. So we want to push countries to the late stages of demographic transition because the population is either decreasing or it's increasing at a very slow amount. Basically meaning that the demand for resources are going to be lower than it is in the beginning of the stages of the demographic transition, because in stage 2, that's where the population really increases. So now we're going to talk about resource depletion. Will this resource be available in the future? That's what we gotta think about when it comes to resource depletion. We need to think how fast I'm going to use a resource, and how can we use it, or can we use it anymore? So when it comes to resource depletion, we need to think about how fast am I using the resource, and can we use it anymore? So when it comes to this, we want to think about reduce, reuse, and recycle to reuse the resources and elongate the time we have with them. So now we're going to talk about sustainable yield. And sustainable yield is the amount of renewable resource that can be taken without reducing the available supply. So MSY is going to be abbreviation of maximum sustainable yield, and K is going to be an abbreviation for carrying capacity. So as we can see, we have a lot of information, so let's digest it. So from 0 to 100, it shows the percent of population harvested, and the MSY is again the maximum sustainable yield. And what the maximum sustainable yield here is going to be when it equals 50% of carrying capacity. So let's say, for example, let's say I have fish. We have 100 fish, and I get from 0 to 49% of fish. That'll be an underuse of the resource, so we can take in more. But if you go from let's say I do like 75 to 100, that's an overuse of the resource. But the maximum sustainable yield is going to be at 50%. And 50%, the 50% carrying capacity has, again, the MSY. And it's because it's the most efficient for harvesters, and it will also leave the population in a number that they can find mates, not competing for so much food, and that their population can grow the fastest. So we can benefit how much we can take and how much of the resources can replenish on its own in a given amount of time. So basically, we benefit because we take in resources, and we're taking enough resources that we're not reducing the available supply, and the available supply increases the fastest in that 50% carrying capacity. So I want to talk about now harvesting a sustainable yield. Remember, K carrying capacity, MSY, the maximum sustainable yield. Now remember, a population grows the fastest and most effectively when 50% carrying capacity. Now when population size is huge, animals will be competing for resources, basically also competing for mates and homes and a lot more, basically stressing population, causing it to slow down in its growth. Now we would want to harvest during the fastest rate or leaving the population at 50% to grow at a fast rate. So let's take, for example, if 100 fish is the carrying capacity and we take 50, there's not much competition for food and the rate grows up crazy, and the following year we can harvest another 50 fish. So how can we harvest sustainable yield? Well, we can research and plan, basically reproductive abilities of a resource. We can set quotas, basically setting limits. We can set limits how much fish we can take, how much deer someone can hunt. We can also require permits, basically managing harvesters, and it manages how many people are going to actually harvest that particular resource. We can also focus on long-term, because remember, sustainability is a long-term effect. And we can also focus on reforest, which is replace trees that were harvested. Now remember, the most important part is you want to leave a resource better than you found it. That's everything we need to know about 5.12. This is another AP3 video. Thank you for watching.